Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. This is Todd with Industrial Comfort. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this jig so that you can make some spoons and coffee scoops for your kitchen. Let me show you how to do it. The only thing you need for this project is a scrap 1x4 and a scrap piece of 2x4 and a few screws to mount to your faceplate. Let's take this over to the saw and get it cut up. I'm going to start with the piece of scrap 2x4. And I'm going to measure out to 5 inches. And then what I'm going to do is, well, there are a couple different ways I can do this. I'm going to go ahead and measure down to 2.5 inches. And I'll create the bisecting line here. And then because this is a 2x4, it actually measures 3.5 inches in width. So I'm going to bring this out at 1 3/4, and we'll mark the center line. With the hole punched here in the wood, I'm going to take my faceplate centering jig, and I'll put a link in the description showing you how to make one of these. I'm going to stick it into the faceplate, and then I'm going to use it to center this faceplate here. I'm then going to orient the holes. I like to use the holes here that are countersunk for no particular reason really, but I'll center this, and then I've got this is a 1/4 inch punch. I'm just going to mark these with the punch. Next thing I'm going to do is cut this at the 5-inch line, and then I'm going to use some 1 5/8 inch screws to mount this faceplate to the board using these locations here, which I'll pre-drill. With the faceplate now mounted, I'm going to cut the piece of 1x4 to the same size. So I'm just going to line this up on the saw. I'm going to line the blade up, take this away, and we'll make our cut. Okay, with the 1x4 cut, I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to mark it 1 3/4, and I'm actually going to draw this line all the way down, and I'll explain why in a second. And then I am going to mark 2.5 inches down, which is going to get us our center point. Okay, now from this center point, because we're going to be making a spoon or a scoop that has a 2-inch in diameter circumference, I know that I've got 1 inch to play with on either side. Okay, so this is going to tell me where to mount the screws that will hold this plate to the 2x4 that we created before. Now, this line is going to represent where the spoon or the scoop handle is going to go. So what I'd like to do is tuck in the screws, somewhere in here so that we can provide some support to the handle, and I'll put the other screws up here to secure the head of the spoon. So I'll figure somewhere about here. I'm just going to draw a line straight across so we get an even line, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of just eyeball it and mark it somewhat equidistant here. And then I'll say, I'll mark it 1 inch in on either side. And then I'll do the same thing up top here. Okay. I'll just give these some dimples with my punch here. And then similar to last time, I'm just going to pre-drill these just to make sure that the wood doesn't crack. I'm using some 2-inch truss head screws. You can really kind of use whatever you want, just as long as the screw is long enough to keep everything together here. Now I've brought our project over to the drill press here, and what I've done is I've carried the center line up and across, and I have marked or punched a little hole that I'm going to use as the guide that sits right between these two pieces of wood. I'm using a 5/8 inch drill bit. This is a Forstner bit, and I'm going to drill down at least to the start of where the spoon head is going to be. And so this is roughly 1 3/4 inches, so I'm more or less going to bury this entire bit. And this channel that we're drilling out is going to serve as the pocket where the handle for the spoon is going to rest. Okay, finally, we're over at the drill press. So we're going to take this jig and we're going to mount it. What I've now done is mount a 1 5/8 inch Forstner bit, which is going to create the starter hole. Now for this side of the template, I really don't want to go probably more than about 1 7/8 inches. So I'm just going to use this to get things started. So we'll drill the hole and then we'll remove this plate and use a 2-inch bit to mark the inside, which is going to serve as the perimeter for the pocket that we're going to use for the spoon. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to use a 2-inch Forstner bit, and I'm not going to drill the hole. I'm just going to kind of mark it so that I know where 2 inches is. The next thing I'm going to do is use a bit, and this can be any size bit, and I'm going to mark where 1 inch is, because I don't want to really drill down any more than 1 inch, and I want this to serve as a marker for the bottom of where the pocket is that we're going to create in the next step. I'm going to essentially carve out a hemisphere using a bowl gouge, and again, this is going to create the cradle that we're going to use for the spoon. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually invert this, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to be able to remove the material to match essentially what is going to be a hemisphere here on the kind of backside here, so that we can cradle the spoon more effectively. I'm going to quickly show you how to create the form of the spoon that we're going to use to stick into the jig to create the final product. And what I'm essentially doing here is creating the shape of a baby rattle. I'm using a 2-inch by 8-inch block of elm wood for the blank, and you just want to be careful that you make the handle the desired length but not too long, so that when you mount it into the jig, you want to make sure that the handle isn't going to whack the bed of the lathe. With the finished shape of the spoon created, now it's the fun part. We get to put it in the jig and hollow out the head of this spoon. Now, when I originally did the previous video, I used a 2-inch pocket, which I've created here, because I figured that a 2-inch diameter spoon head is roughly 2 tablespoons, which is what a coffee scoop is. It just so happens that this shape is also good for a number of other things. If you're looking for a different volume on the head of your spoon, you're going to want to just modify ultimately the pocket of this jig here. So what I've also done is I've gotten in the habit of wrapping the handle of the spoon with a bike inner tube, or at least a piece of an inner tube. You can use a latex glove or anything else that's going to give you that extra security to make sure that the spoon doesn't move in the jig. So I'm going to put this in, and then we'll go ahead and hollow out the center. I hope you found this video helpful. As you can see, it's not too much work to put something like this together, and it creates some really cool little scoops and spoons. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.